President Biden's announcement that he intends to nominate a Black woman to the Supreme Court has been getting strong negative feedback from some groups. An elected official and a college professor will be my guest to discuss why such a nomination is important. Later in this program, downtown Brooklyn, a civil rights tradition that goes back to the 19th century. Raul Rothblatt will be joining me to discuss that. But we begin with a topic that's being talked about not only in Brooklyn, but across the United States. Let me welcome my guest, City Council Member Charles Barron. Welcome to Brooklyn 45.
Thank you, Sam.
And Medgar Evers Professor Zulema Blair, who is also chair of the Public Department Administration. Welcome to Brooklyn 45.
Thank you.
My question, and both of you can answer this, why are the words Black woman causing such controversy?
Well, it could be looked at as a number of different scenarios. One, it seems to be now this power grab, right? The strongest voting bloc and now considered the most educated racial group or racial minority group is wielding this power, yet they're underrepresented at the judicial level or in the judicial branch of government. And so this dearth of or this scarcity of Black women in this field, it's like, well, who do you pick? And so why do you have to say Black women when you say this? Plus, it's this bit of a social dilemma that they have with Black women. They say Black women have attitude, they never know which way they're gonna go, but yet they wield this confidence and this knowledge and this political empowerment piece that no one could really come to grips with. They're unpredictable. And so now they're uncontrollable. Plus, let's not forget, we still have Clarence Thomas and his treatment of a Black female clerk, right? Hanging over Anita Hill, hanging over our shoulders and hanging over his shoulders, hanging over all these male Supreme Court justice shoulders. So you have a lot of different angles that you can look at this through. And so I think it's a little bit of confusion and elephants in the room, if you will, when it comes to this.
Council Member Barron, your turn.
It's not Black women that are the controversy. It's racist white men, whether they're Joe Biden in the Democratic Party or whether they're in the Republican Party. We got to stop thinking that there's something wrong with us and we're causing the controversy. The controversy comes because Joe Biden, this is the same Joe Biden who was the head of the Senate Judiciary Committee when they selected Clarence Thomas. And even though Anita Hill charged him with sexism, Joe Biden wanted to confirm the vote in spite of that. Got too many pressure from women's group that had to stop it, so they had to have a hearing, and he was confirmed anyway. By the way, Clarence Thomas was confirmed with 42 members of the Republican Party, and about 11 members of the Democratic Party voted for Clarence Thomas, even though he was a conservative and they're supposed to be liberal. So when Joe Biden says, I want to have a Black woman, that's because he was desperate during his campaign, wanted to manipulate the Black vote, and that's what he promised during the campaign. Now, the 2022 elections are coming up. Black women, Black people are going to make a big difference. So now he's saying he wants a Black woman. And let's not be fooled by Black faces in high places. We had a Black president. We had a Black U.S. Attorney General. Not one police officer was indicted for 8 years under Biden. In New York State, we have a Black head of the Senate, a Black head of the Assembly. We have a Black Attorney General. We have a Black public advocate. We have a Black majority leader in the Assembly. We have a Black borough president in Queens, Black borough president in the Bronx, Black Latino borough president in Brooklyn. We have a Black mayor, a Black police chief, a Black chancellor for the schools. We have Black DAs in several boroughs. We have Black U.S. attorneys in several boroughs. And we have Black poverty off the hook. So Let's not be fooled by black faces in high places. It's not that he wants somebody black. Who is this black person? What are their politics? We can no longer allow the Democratic Party to select black people in high places that maintain the same policies of this racist Democratic Party. Our poverty doesn't move. So beware of black faces in high places. It doesn't mean black power. It doesn't mean black liberation for certain.
Okay, well, let's
jump in. Yeah.
Go on, Zulema.
Yeah, I reviewed a couple of the potential nominees for Supreme Court justices, and they're pretty black females, yeah, but they have been on the conservative side of the aisle, you know, in terms of the criminal justice policies that they chose to take or the criminal justice issues that they chose to tackle. One even sat on the sentencing commission that, you know, incarcerated many of our black men and women for the last 20 to 30 years. So, you know, I want to see which black person as well gets to the bench. You know, they're choosing all the individuals that go to the elite colleges. There's nothing wrong with going to the elite universities, et cetera. I mean, I went to New York Law School. I didn't go to Harvard Law, et cetera. But I mean, you learn a balanced education. And so, yes, we want to applaud black women and we want to applaud all their accomplishments. But we also want to be certain that this is not, you know, oh, I want to make good. I want to make good on what I've done in the past, or I want to make, you know, it's hard. And that's what it seems like we're getting out of Joe Biden. So I've done this wrong. I want to overturn this. You know.
Okay, let me get back to the topic of the program. Why is it important to have a black woman in the Supreme Court?
First of all, Sam, you didn't leave the topic of the program. We were talking about the topic of the program. I think the professor is making an excellent point. Even if you get a radical black on the Supreme Court, which you will not get, I think the professor made an excellent point. Joe Biden's a conservative Democrat. Remember, he's the architect, the prime sponsor of the crime bill. Even Bill Clinton later said that was a mistake. Biden was the sponsor of that crime bill, so he's going to get somebody of his politics. Right. It's colonial capitalism that's the problem, not just race. But the professor made an excellent point. Right now, there are 9 members of the Supreme Court, Sam. 6 of them are conservatives. So who Biden puts on is almost irrelevant. The vote's going to be 6-3. Sonia Sotomayor, she's the one that is the most left-leaning on the Supreme Court. And when the vote goes down, it's 6-3. So he can say that, knowing that nothing's going to change the Supreme Court, but he'll get black people voting for him again and deliver nothing. Look at all of the promises he said. Vote for me, I got your back, you put me in. Can't even get the college loans done away with, $15 minimum wage. He has delivered on little or nothing. And our vote comes cheap. As long as you have access, as long as you point me to some position, we get the vote. Remember what Martin Luther King said. And by the way, Martin Luther King was a socialist like me. Y'all love Dr. King, but you don't love socialism. Martin Luther King said that the white power structure selects these black leaders, gives them material benefits and prestigious positions as long as they maintain control over them and they support the colonial capitalist system. He called them manufactured leaders by the white power structure. And we got a bunch of manufactured leaders that are black running around here today, supported, controlled by the white power structure.
So I agree, but I do think it is important if symbolism purposes. I mean, being from Brooklyn, the largest black population in all of North America, you know, we know that saying, Central Brooklyn, South Brooklyn, Southeast Brooklyn, we have the largest black population. And so for black little girls seeing this nomination on TV would be tremendous. I mean, keep in mind, we've never ascended to that role. We've often been punished by that role. And so now being in that structure to possibly even write a dissent or even influence some form of the dissenting opinion, when it comes to a conservative issue, whether it's overturning Roe versus Wade or the knock-and-enter rule when it comes to criminal justice issues. And also, not just on the Supreme Court justice as well, but also the first female governor. I think a lot of issues that are controlled by the state, states' rights and states' politics, especially where the appellate division is concerned or the federal justices are concerned, that are controlled by US senators. I think it is important that a Black woman is finally chosen for those roles, even if it's by the white majority. So we'll see whether, well, in South Carolina it's Clyburn, but we'll see whether Dick Durbin or someone of that nature is able to, really ascend a Black woman to that role. There's a sister in California, Kelanji Jackson, who's supposed to be considered as a nominee. And so a couple of others. We'll see how it goes.
Well, but Sam, we got to select substance over symbolism. We've been at symbolism.
That too.
We need substance.
Barack
Obama was symbolic. What did we say? Oh, he's going to stretch the imagination of our youth. The first Black president, symbolism. We had the first Black mayor in New York City, David Dinkins, symbolism. We had the first Black female vice president. I don't know if she says she's Black, she's mixed, whatever. Kamala Harris. Symbolism is over. We are in a state of emergency. We don't have time for symbolism. Played that game in the 60s, the first Black this, the first Black that, but it doesn't change poverty, unemployment, mass incarceration, homelessness in a state with all of those Blacks in power, a $200 billion budget, Sam, in the state, a $100 billion budget in the city, and all Blacks in power. Look at the poverty. Look at the Black elected officials across this country, over 16,000. Look at the chocolate cities. They're turning them to marshmallow cities now with gentrification, but look at the chocolate cities. Poverty running wild. Symbolism is over. We need substance. We need radical change. Our people are dying.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I was thinking in terms of age groups. So yes, we do need substantive, and we know that demographic representation often breeds substantive representation, and hopefully we choose individuals with the mindset that can go out and implement some of those things. The reason why I mentioned her is because she was on some groundbreaking issues in terms of body cameras, officers wearing body cameras, et cetera, as opposed to sitting on the sentencing commission that incarcerated our individuals, our young Black men and young Black women. So, also, I just believe that, Breyer, he did us a favor, right? We had an opportunity to put a Black woman on the bench before, but we didn't. We put 2 women on the bench, okay? And so putting a Black woman on a bench, maybe we can swing the pendulum just a little in terms of the narrative or the types of conversations or philosophical underpinnings that come out of these conversations.
Zulema, you are a college professor. You are in touch with Black students. You're at Medgar College, where the majority of students the majority is probably Black. You mentioned earlier that having the first Black Supreme Judge may send a message that there are highly credentialed and highly qualified women. Respond to that and talk a bit about how do you see this impacting the beliefs of Black young people in particular, and the performance of Black college kids.
So on many different fronts, Sam. In fact, when, as chair of the Department of Public Administration, when many of our students come to the college, the first thing that they ask is, do you have a criminal justice degree? And so that was a big issue for us to get implemented, even if it's at the associate degree level, because we know that John Jay has been the premier there. So having that news and having individuals see that there are some Black faces on the highest courts where it impacts the justice system is significant. Also, when individuals get involved in or get civically involved or take to protest, take to the streets, whatever they do in terms of civic engagement, it is usually based on the issue that affects us, right? In terms of criminal justice issues, whether it's a police shooting, whether it's, a stop and frisk case, whatever it is, whether it's a housing incident, whether it's a jump in the turnstile incident, these are all issues that we feel targeted by. And so we feel like at some point there is some hope. But I have to go back to what the council member said. When you hear some of the opinions, you get disappointed, but still there is hope. And so if they start to understand how the process works, I think it will educate them a little bit more and say, this is what we have to work towards.
We've just got a minute left. So Councilman, I'm coming back to you. How do we move from hope? How do we move from hope? Zulema?
Well, I think we got to build a strong Black radical independent political movement. We have too many bourgeois Blacks from the Democratic Party going along to get along, more concerned about personal ambition and rugged individualism than the liberation of our people. So we got to get beyond, we got the first Black this, and we need to produce Black youth coming out of college that are like Martin Luther King and Malcolm X and Fannie Lou Hamer, and like Tupac Shakur's mother, Afeni Shakur, revolutionaries, radicals that need to change this capitalist system, not try to be in it and be integrated into it. Sam, that's never gonna happen. You can fight for the rest of your life trying to get equality into a fatally flawed colonial capitalist system that's racist. We need radical systemic change. We've done that in East New York. It's happening in other parts of the country where radicals are getting in office, and these bourgeois Blacks that are happy to be the first Black this and that, when the system never changes, our conditions will not change. We need radical systemic change, not symbolism and not organizing just around the symptoms of capitalism, like poverty and all of that. We got to organize around systemic change.
So I want to thank you, Council Member Barron, and I want to thank you, Professor Zulema Blair. Thank you very much for being on Brooklyn 45.
Thanks for having me. Bye-bye.
Revolution in our lifetime, Sam.
Thank you, Council Member Barron, and thank you, Professor Zulema Blair. Black Brooklyn has history. The Underground Railroad, women, and the Abolitionist movement, 227 Duffield Street, all part of Brooklyn's unappreciated 19th century civil rights tradition. Joining me to share information with you and thousands of Brooklyn residents who know nothing about this is Raul Rothblatt, who is Vice Chair of Friends of Abolitionist Place. Raul, welcome to Brooklyn 45.
Thank you so much. It's an incredible honor to be here and to be among your amazing guests. I'm a great fan of the show. Thank you for having me.
What is this Abolitionist Place?
So, New York City tried to demolish a stop on the Underground Railroad at 227 Duffield. And activist, this is in downtown Brooklyn near City Point off the Fulton Street Mall, and a woman named Mama Joy Chattel got a notice that her home was going to be confiscated and demolished in 2003. And it took many years to show that it was actually a stop on the Underground Railroad and owned by some very interesting abolitionists, and that it was really connected to a much larger movement of abolitionists who lived in the area. And before I go any further, I have to mention that New York City was very much in favor of slavery. New York City was essentially neutral during the Civil War. Our city wanted to, or at least our mayor, Fernando Wood, in 1862 wanted to secede from the United States because of the financial ties of New York City, including Brooklyn at that point, to the Southern slave system. So we were not all abolitionists over here. And even people who opposed slavery did not really like abolitionists. So there were some brave people who opposed the owning other human beings, and one of them lived at 227 Duffield. And so it's important to save that history here in Brooklyn, and to also acknowledge our connection to slavery in New York City.
You have said that New York City has a legal obligation to build a monument at Abolitionist Place, and that they've got the money to do it. What is the problem?
So what happened was, when Mama Joy fought in New York City in 2007, she won. And in 2008, the mayor at that time, Mayor Bloomberg, signed a contract. We have a legal obligation to build a monument to 19th century Brooklyn abolitionist history. So it's very clear if you look back at what the statements at that time, the documents at that time, no ambiguity there. And over time, the city has neglected that promise, failed to live up to that promise, and continues to this day to not fulfill that obligation, to talk about that history. This is an important part of New York City history that needs to be acknowledged in a very specific way, I believe.
You've spoken about Mayor Bloomberg, and I know that in 2021, Mayor de Blasio had a meeting with your organization. What did he promise, if he promised anything?
Well, what happened on February 2nd, 2021, is the Landmarks Preservation Commission voted to give landmarks protection to 227 Duffield. So that means the building itself is legally safe. The landmarks law are very strict in New York City. And in fact, this was the only individual landmark in Brooklyn in 2021, was saving the 227 Duffield, or Abolitionist Place. And so we had a big event in City Hall on that day, and it was a very emotional thing, really to be there in City Hall as really the main event of Black History Month that year was the preservation of that building. So it has been legally protected. It still is a challenge to make sure that the building maintains it's deteriorated a lot. So we still have to keep an eye on it. So even, landmark buildings, every now and then, even landmark buildings fall down. So we want to keep an eye on it, but it is protected as a landmark.
You've spoken on occasion about Brooklyn's underappreciated 19th century civil rights tradition.
Yeah.
Now, how can we make Duffield Street, 227 Duffield Street, how can we make all of this appreciated?
There's so much work to be done. I mean, there is so much history in downtown Brooklyn. What's beautiful about 227 Duffield is there were underground passageways connecting all the buildings along that side. So you can go down to this day, if you can get in, and you could see exactly where these passageways were between that building and the other buildings surrounding it. And for me, this is a physical metaphor that you can touch something. You could be, a 5-year-old kid, and you could see, okay, these things were connected. This was more than just one person, one place. It was a whole community of people. And that community, some important remnants of that community live today. For instance, the churches, Bridge Street Church was founded early in the 19th century. That Bridge Street Church still exists to this day. It moved out of downtown Brooklyn. It's in Bed-Stuy, but that tradition is alive. Concord Baptist Church is still alive. a lot of these institutions exist to this day. And so, that to me is very exciting, to reanimate those traditions. Understanding the stories of the Truesdales and what they fought for, the residents of 227 Duffield, is part of that. But they were connected to a larger movement. We would have, for instance, there were huge picnics they would celebrate Emancipation Day. Before the Civil War, the African Americans in Brooklyn celebrated West Indian liberation on August 1st. So the fact that we have a connection between the African American community and the Caribbean community is not something new. This is not a 21st century thing. This goes back to the 1850s. So there's so many interesting, exciting elements to explore. And I'm very glad that you asked it as a question of civil rights history, because abolitionism was only part of the whole story too. There were a lot of white supremacists, a lot of racists among the abolitionists as well. So we have one monument to Brooklyn abolitionist history, and that is Henry Ward Beecher. And you have him looking wisely off into the distance, and you have a African-American woman who's like praying up to him as if he's the savior. No, there were African-Americans here who were their own saviors. This community did not always need, or it often did not need, any sort of white intervention. I mean, this was something homegrown here. Weeksville community was part of that. These were African-Americans who founded their own community where they could own property, because slavery was abolished in New York State in 1827, but the laws to prevent black suffrage started very soon, even before 1827. So they had to own property in order to vote, and so they founded Weeksville. So, and a lot of the founders of Weeksville actually lived in downtown Brooklyn.
There's certainly a lot to learn, Raul, who is the vice chair of Friends of Abolitionist Place. Just send us some information, and we will put some links to your website so that people can get more information about what you are doing and about the history, the civil rights tradition, and the history of everything we've talked about. 227 Duffield Street. Thank you very much for being on Brooklyn 45, Raul Rothblatt.
Can I do one last person, one name I have to mention here is the one person, none of this would be here today if it wasn't for Mama Joy. And so I really want to give my appreciation to her, her family, and the whole movement that she inspired. So this is something bigger, and it includes everyone here. And I really want to thank you for letting me speak about it tonight.
Okay. Raul Rothblatt, Vice Chair of Friends of Abolitionist Place.
Great. Thank you.
On behalf of our entire team here on Brooklyn 45, I am Sam Taitt.